Welcome to another episode of Taking Down Trump. I'm your host, Tristan Snell. We have an amazing episode for you and an amazing interview for you today. We're going to be joined by the senator from Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse. He's also a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and has been one of the top voices in Congress talking about corruption and extremism on the Supreme Court and what we can do about it. So you're definitely not going to want to miss that. That's coming up shortly. First off, of course, the Democratic National Convention last week in Chicago, which I was proud and honored to get to attend and speak at on Thursday night, and got a really, really interesting view on how things are going in Democratic politics right now. And the answer is they're going really well. I mean, obviously everybody's saying that, but to kind of see it with my own eyes, to run into a lot of other people in the space who are commentators or players in the national drama, to hear their optimism when from, talking to those people 6 months ago, 12 months ago, whatever, where there was so much pessimism and doubt about how this year was going to go, just being able to hear people express a sense of cautious optimism about the election, about how things are going to go in November. It's a really great feeling. There is obviously just a palpable enthusiasm around the ticket, and also around a lot of the other speakers, because it was a embarrassment of riches, really, in a lot of ways, with all of the really wonderful speakers throughout the whole week, really showed off that the Democratic Party is a lot deeper in terms of its bench than it gets credit for in the mainstream media. There's this notion that the media has put out there that, oh, well, Biden's there because there really wasn't anybody else. I think that looking back, the concerns that I think a lot of us shared regarding having a clean handoff to Kamala Harris were definitely valid concerns. And now in retrospect that those concerns were sidestepped, of course, it looks like an absolutely genius move, and it was. I think those concerns were still there, but thank God they got resolved. We didn't have a contested convention. We didn't have a rushed primary process. We didn't have a situation in which Harris was passed over for somebody else that some other big donor liked better. We got the convention that we really wanted and deserved, and I think that it went off beautifully. And it was definitely a real rush to get up there and have a little bit of time to speak to the delegates and to all of you at home. And of course, we covered last week a deeper dive on what really happened at Trump University, which was the topic of my speech there. But now we're going to want to cover some of the other topics in the news this week before we then get to our interview with Senator Whitehouse regarding the Supreme Court. One thing that happened that I think got a little bit lost in the shuffle with the DNC was Donald Trump is going to be having a gala to honor, and I put that I should honor because there's no honor for these people. He is holding a gala for the January 6th attackers. Okay. Words almost fail. They don't entirely, because I do have something to say about this, but for one thing, if he has any interaction with any of those attackers that have been convicted and are serving prison sentences, he actually needs to report that to the authorities in New York, because it's a standard condition that a convicted felon not associate with any other convicted felons. But just also, again, this is one of these things, and it's something I'm going to say increasingly as we get closer and closer to the election, things we need to talk about all the time, daily, between now and the election. The fact that he is hosting this, the fact that he's embracing these lawbreakers, these police attackers, these are people that assaulted the Capitol Police. If you are somebody that has as one of your central tenets the notion of, quote unquote, back the blue, that you can be a Republican, great, that's fine, more power to you. But how can you support Donald Trump or anybody else who has been supportive of what happened that day? The Capitol Police being attacked, beat up. A lot of them are now no longer with us because of this. One died that day, several others in the days and weeks afterwards. How can you possibly do that with the number of these people who had to go to the hospital afterwards. Okay, these people were beaten and attacked. They had objects thrown at them. They were beaten with blunt objects. And it was thousands of people doing this. Hundreds of these people are now behind bars. How could you possibly support these people? How could you do it? How can you support the violence? If you were supporting the January 6th attackers, then you were supporting violent overthrow of the American government. You were supporting violent brutality directed at police officers. You cannot actually stand up and say, you know what, I'm just going to say it. If you think that it's a good idea that Donald Trump is having this gala, if you think that these people are somehow political prisoners as opposed to criminals, go take that goddamn sticker off your car, the one with the thin blue line. Take it off your car because it doesn't, like, you clearly aren't. It's not there. You don't actually have that belief. You're not backing the blue. You're backing the brutality. You're backing the attacking of police officers. And if you don't believe it, go online and watch some of the interviews with some of these police officers. Okay, these were not plants. These were not Antifa. They're not crisis actors. These were cops who came in every day. They got their cup of coffee. They did their job. They punched a clock. They went home. It's stressful. It's hard. They protected the Capitol. They protected our one of our nation's most sacred buildings. And then those people got hurt and assaulted. Forget it. Like, if you're going to tell me that Donald Trump backs the blue, I don't want to hear it anymore. I'm done. It's over. There's no way that man is supportive of police officers when you're doing something like that. And that is something that we all need to be talking about with our friends, with our neighbors, with our family members every day between now and the election, especially if you're talking about folks who live in a swing state. Please do it. But on to a little bit of better news. The board of directors of the Federal Reserve met last week, and we got some very, very good news. It turns out that the Fed is going to be doing rate cuts. Interest rate cuts are coming. The Fed has concluded that the changes and disruptions to the economy that occurred as a result of COVID, including the inflation that we saw, that is mostly behind us, that inflation is basically back to normal. There's still some fighting to be done, but that it is basically back to normal, and that thereby there now is work to be done to bring rates down so that we don't cause the economy to go into a recession, we don't cause unemployment to go up. The markets very enthusiastically responded to this news. It looks like there may be multiple rate cuts over the months to come, and let's just light a candle for all of the, doom and gloom that's been coming, the sort of death cheering that we've been hearing from the far right folks who have actually been cheering for an American recession. They're actually hoping that the American economy would go into a recession because it would be bad for Democrats. That's how messed up Trump and his allies are, that they actually think it's a good thing to root against America. Just have that sink in for a moment. But then we'll move on to some other political news that seems a bit farcical, but actually does have a serious component to it that I think has been a little overlooked. And that is RFK Jr. mostly kind of weirdly half suspending his campaign, sort of, and then endorsing Donald Trump. Here's the problem with this, is that a lot of the reporting around all of this has been about RFK potentially trying to angle for a post in a upcoming White House administration. He, in his little speech, whined and moaned and bitched and complained about the fact that Vice President Kamala Harris wouldn't meet with him, even though he tried to get a meeting with her. It turns out that it's not only maybe that Kamala Harris understands that RFK Jr. is an opportunist and a whack job, who was completely selling out all of his views on environmentalism that he had over decades to endorse a guy who is completely in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry. No. Forget about that for a second. It turns out that Harris was probably credit due to a former prosecutor with Harris, that I think she and the people around her were smart enough to realize that even taking that meeting could have been flirting with breaking the law. Here's why. It's actually a federal crime to promise a post in an administration in exchange for an endorsement. Bet you didn't know that. So if RFK has been running around trying to like get a job as like the next head of the EPA, and that he was like trying to see if he could weasel his way in there with Harris, that's illegal. You can't do that. That's a federal crime. So of course she didn't meet with him. And of course Donald Trump did. And we don't know precisely what he's been promised. Is it an ambassadorship? Is it a post in the cabinet? Whatever. Can he be a brainworm czar and go on the road with public service announcements talking about the dangers of brainworms and why Americans need to be more concerned about this topic? Whatever it is that he is going to get as some sort of stupid federal job in a second Trump administration, whatever that was that they probably talked about, if they did, if true, that was a federal crime. So you can add that to the list of crimes that Donald Trump has been continuing to potentially allegedly commit as he's running for president yet again. And we're going to talk about that a bit more in more detail with something a lot more serious in just a moment. The thing that I feel merits a bit of a longer discussion this week, well, let's just put it like this. I'm guessing most of you who can remember the pre-Trump era, it's the kind of political and legal story that if it had come out about any national politician, or pretty much any politician, but certainly somebody running for a national ticket, prior to 2015, when Trump first really came on the scene, it would have been the end of their career. They would have needed to quit the race, resign their post. They would just go home. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. You're headed straight to the political jail or to a literal one, okay? That's what happened last week and yet we sort of shrugged these things off when they happened with Donald Trump especially, because it's just baked in. We just assume, oh, well, crimer's going to crime, grifter's going to grift. PBS, this is not, by the way, I'm not the one who broke this story. It didn't come from somebody on Substack. This came from PBS, okay? PBS last week, and it didn't get nearly as much attention as it should have, in part because of the DNC, but PBS confirms with its reporting that not only did Donald Trump have a fake summit with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago a few weeks ago, Trump did, in fact, do the thing that a lot of us were speculating he was doing. He was pressuring Netanyahu to not accept a ceasefire until after the election, because a ceasefire would help Biden and Kamala Harris and would hurt Donald Trump. That keeping the war going the next few months is going to help Trump, and that I'm sure the other piece of this, the pro quo to the quid is, and if I get in, I'm going to give you a free hand to conduct the war however you want, BB. So we now know what we were speculating about a few weeks ago, that wasn't just a photo op. That was a private U.S. citizen engaging in foreign policy, with unauthorized foreign policy, against the law, against the Logan Act, which has been on the books since 1799, because even back in those early years of America, it was considered to be a major problem that required Congress to pass a law and the president to sign it, that you couldn't have private citizens running off, undermining the foreign policy of the United States of America. That is what is happening here, because our government's official position, agree with it or not, I think actually everybody agrees with it, is that the official position of the United States of America is killing bad, ceasefire good. Okay? This is something that I think virtually everybody can agree on. There are very few people that I've spoken to that are like, nope, there shouldn't be a ceasefire. Everybody should just go on killing each other. No. Okay, I think virtually everybody's in agreement. The only person in America, maybe, who wants the war to go on unabated is Donald J. Trump, and maybe a few of his other insider cronies, the darkest of the dark in his inner circle, okay? This is an absolutely horrific diabolical thing for anybody to do. He wants more people to die in the next few months because it's good for him politically. Okay. Western diplomats led